Hola, bienvenidos a una nueva franja de Gestos de la Poesía, la franja literaria de la Universidad de los Andes. Hoy estamos con la poeta Chaitalli Chattopahyay, gracias a la participación y la colaboración de Anthony Magazine. Vamos a tener una conversación con esta poeta bengalí y voy a leer brevemente su biografía. Chaitalli Chattopahyay trabajó como profesora de ciencias antes de dedicarse a la edición. Se ha dedicado por largos años a la poesía y ha publicado varios libros de poemas y también una novela y una colección de cuentos cortos. Ha recibido muchos premios, incluido el Vishnu Day Award, el Uday Bharati National Award y el Meribai Award. Chaitalli, it's a pleasure to be with you today. Welcome to this conversation. I really enjoyed your poetry, and I noticed that one of the main themes of your poetry is love, right?
Not actually love, but suffocation, crisis, many other things relate to me, relate to us, women.
Exactly. I thought that in that theme of, well, I read it as love, like a relationship between partners, right? But there's a big theme that's like incommunication, right? Like the inability to create a language in which people could be understood. Do you think, could you tell us about like that relationship between language communication and the writing of poetry and having like human relationships?
Human relationship, it's very complicated. Actually, I think from my childhood that nothing is permanent, and that trigger the things. There is actually no proper relationship between anything, and in this world, the bridge is not very stable. It's somehow broken somewhere. I always think so. There is no compact thing, there is no continuation. The relationship, the family, the world situation, everything is going to break. That's the thing. I always fear. And in spite of all those things, in spite of all those negative vibes, I love to love.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I was thinking that means that you don't allow yourself to fall into despair, right?
Actually, it's not horror, but it's some kind of disillusion, some kind of, we are women, we are treated as second-class citizen globally. It's not in our India, it's globally. Sometimes sophisticated, sometimes crude. The way is very crude, but it happens. So we have not that agony, panic, sufferings, claustrophobia, all these things. In respect of political situation, in respect of social situation, everything. But still, we want to say, there is light, let there be light, and there will be light. We want to say. That's the end of the day. We hope for the future, positive future.
And do you feel that poetry has helped you find that light?
Not always, but poetry try. Poetry can't say the final thing, can't say the final verdict, but poetry also can try. Poetry relate me, poetry relate my surroundings, and that's how poetry tries to be positive, to be loved.
And can you tell us which was like your first approach to poetry?
Mm, I I worked in a advertising agency where I have to write copy as the copywriter there, and I I have to write the text where the women's are commodity, and these things when I write a product, say a safety razor, say a powder or something like that, then also the women's are the model and women's are the commodity, and
Mhm.
this hurts me. And then I write my poetry as the housewives, the working girls, the prostitutes, all are commodities some way. This haunt me, and my first poetry book is regarding all these women's.
Wow. And could you tell us more about like that condition of women that find themselves in situations of marginality or situations of violence? Could you tell us more about that?
Actually, I'm not the social activist. I'm not a feminist. I can also try. That I told you before. I tried that it will change. Someday it will change. Then that inequality came to equal things. The equality for women's. This is a marginal position, not uh, the poor people also in India, very marginal. They are marginal and they are uh, down the poverty line. They are all sufferings, not only women's. Actually, mm, economics handle all these things in our society. In all
Mhm.
society, I think we have to economically independent to overcome this situation.
Okay. And why do you choose the language you choose to speak about these things?
I don't know. By default, it came. I don't know. No, deliberately I choose the language. No, deliberately I choose poetry. It came. It happens like magic. Actually,
Like
so
magic.
I
Because your
can't
poetry, excuse me.
tell the grammar of my poems. I can't. I'm unable.
Mm. Yeah, because your poetry can be really narrative also, right?
It is negative, but there is a hint of light.
No,
There is a hint
narrative.
of dawn.
Na- I meant narrative, not negative.
Acha, okay, okay.
And speaking of narrative, your writing of prose is similar in these themes to your poetry.
It depends. Sometimes, yeah, it depends. Sometimes my prose tend to incline to poetry. Then I became cautious.
Okay.
It should not be lyrical or like poetry, I think, the prose. But sometimes it happens.
Mm. But it can also be right. There can be a like a link between the lyrical and the narrative. I think that happens in your poetry a lot.
Yeah, yeah, true. Happens to my poetry and also in prose also. Actually, sometimes I write in the prose the post editorial in newspapers. I have to write the prose, assigned prose, and by for some social reason, social issue, gender issue. It also want to become poetry. Actually, I think there is no hard and fast rule and no wall, no actual concrete wall between prose and poetry.
Exactly.
So
So that makes me wonder, um, what do you, how could you define maybe poetry? Could you? That's a little bit like risky or difficult, but could you put in your own words what do you consider is poetry?
I can't. I can't say what is poetry. I can't say, I can't define the rain. I can't define you the dewdrop. I can't define you a flower. I can't define poetry. It came, it
That's beautiful.
come
Yeah,
automatically. For me, don't, I can never say for others, but for me, it come automatically.
it comes out. And at what age did you start writing?
Hmm, actually, when I was in school, we have a wall magazine, and I was the editor of that wall magazine. So that's why I can tell, my in my age of 13, 14, I started writing poetry, prose.
Mm. And can you remember like the first poem you wrote?
Not in school days, but in college days, I write a poem, and it was published in our very prestigious magazine, Desh. In that
And
poem, there is a line, I tear my cunt. And that was very funny. The people, many of them, it is very, when you talk about it, why you write this kind of bold language, etc., etc.
could you repeat to me the line? I couldn't hear it right.
I can tear up my cunt, my
Okay.
uh, sexual organ. I mean,
Okay. Wow, that's a really
controversial.
strong verse.
And many people talk many things about this.
But it's amazing. I think that poetry should. It's great when poetry uses that kind of language and uses that kind of approximation to reality.
Actually, the poetry don't need any censorship, but as for women in our land, we have self-censorship that is needed in here.
And, and have you been censored?
No, since self-censored, we have to censor by one self.
Wow. Okay. And
And
uh,
I censored my poem by me, but I can't. I don't do this. But it is a social norm. Thing will be very polite, very soft,
yeah.
full of flowery language.
That so I wanted to ask to you that about like the literary um like the literary presence, the literary life of India, because we've been able to meet a lot of poets from Calcutta,
Mm,
thanks to the antonym and thanks to this link with the
mm,
Andes,
mm,
and it's something that we don't get to to listen to or to meet very often. So I
mm.
want to ask you what kind of poetry is being written in India right now, or what great influences is having the Indian writers.
In India, actually the political situation is not so good here. No, it's very complicated. And poverty is there, very much poverty is there. So there are various kind of poems. The poets, they write many things. Sometimes about poverty, sometimes of nature, sometimes of love, sometimes of war.
Okay.
Political comes very much here. That affects the art. That naturally that affects the art and literature.
And particularly, which writers influence your own writing?
Naturally, Rabindranath, Arintigo, and also many writers, Jivanananda, Bengali writers. And
Mm.
it, for modern age, I love Sylvia Plath's writing. I love Virginia Woolf's writing, Emily Dickinson. I love to read.
That influences primarily women writers.
Primarily women writers. Primarily.
That's really great because here in Colombia, like the panorama of poetry, of contemporary poetry, is led by women, and
Interesting.
yeah, practically, because there's been a renovation of like our literary influences and our literary like pursuits, and most of them have been like really great women poets are publishing a lot right now.
But
And
you write romantic poem or something?
no, 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 it's very political. It's very linked to like the experience of the body. It's very linked with violence.
Hmm.
um I think it's maybe similar to what happens with what you just told me, because it has to do a lot with like the experience of the Colombian reality, and put into a language that never, like it had never been written before.
Hmm.
Like Colombia is very
Hmm.
traditional, and
Acha.
poetry can be
Oh,
very traditional and like very old fashioned, and sound like in this last 20 years things have
hmm.
changed a lot thanks to women.
Hmm. How, how come?
I think maybe because because of the internet, because the internet has allowed a lot of influence from other traditions
Hmm.
to arrive to Colombia,
Acha.
and when people started to read like exactly Sylvia
Hmm.
Plath, Virginia
Hmm.
Woolf,
Hmm.
and other writers that are very contemporary, and that have another language completely different to the traditional old-fashioned, like even pre-modern
Hmm.
uh, writing that we had a lot, and that was led,
Modern writing
led.
is also there.
Excuse me.
Postmodernism. Postmodernism is also there.
Yeah,
Postmodernism. Hmm.
yeah, it is.
Hmm.
And so I find it very interesting that something maybe similar is happening in India. And
Actually, there is so much violence in India. So
okay,
it naturally come to our poetry. We can't
and
sleep.
natural.
We can't sleep or not in hibernation and write of nature, flower. It can't possibly. Yeah. You have to walk through the fire. You
Yeah.
can't help it.
And do you find, are you still a science teacher?
No, I'm not a science teacher. I read physics, but I was copywriter. My career is very messy. I always do what I like. I always
That's
took
great.
the liver to do anything.
That's really great.
No, it's not
So,
great. It is very controversial and difficult. Not so great.
really?
Actually, actually so.
Wow. And why is it controversial?
Because I studied physics, but I don't go in science line. I took creative line. I took journalism. I took, I mean, copywriting. That's why it's not any so-called path.
Is any of these other disciplines influential in your poetry, like physics, maybe? Or
Phys-
is it?
uh, Physics, Bangla, I mean Bengali. Bengali is my favorite. I write in Bengali. And I love music. Music is also my passion.
And do you write music or not?
No, I don't write music, but music comes to my poetry always.
It comes.
As a motive, it comes to my poetry. Motive or allegory, it comes.
I was able to read a couple of poems that you sent, and one that interested to me a lot was this one about the white page. I don't know if I'm translating it okay, because I received it in Spanish. It's like
But you read it in Spanish, right?
I read it in Spanish, exactly.
Mhm.
But it's about the white page, right?
White page, huh?
The white page, and like
In
this
Bengali,
experience.
Shada Pata. Shada
Yeah.
Pata in Bengali.
And could you talk to us? That's a really beautiful poem, because it talks about maybe that incapacity of communicating, right?
Right.
Uh, and maybe that white page is the only place.
And some mystery
Mystery.
is there. I love mystery in my poems.
Yeah,
And
it's very mysterious.
I always left some things that will be in between words. Not all the feelings will be told. You have to read the reader's text. It will be the reader's text. Reader will read it. Reader will find it. I don't write everything, but you have to explore it from my poem. That's my wish.
But that's really beautiful, because the poem says that also, right? Like, when I'm
Yeah,
gone, the white page is gonna say everything I did not say.
but did not say.
Yeah. Maybe could you maybe talk to us about that poem, or the writing of the poem? Why was it born, or?
The Actually, it is easy to write, but tell the making of a film, but it's not so easy to tell about the making of a poetry. Somehow
Yeah.
difficult. That was very disturbed time in my life. That was very disturbed time. Disturbed emotionally. I am very much broken, and then I write that white page. It won't be white. There is some dirt, some insult, some humiliation that will drop in that page.
Okay.
That's it.
Wow. But
There's
you
something is untold, and you have to explore this. That was written also, the last lines.
yeah. And do you think that maybe that writing helped you, like, uh, transit that
Writing
time?
helped me to live only. This is the ultimate word. The writing helps me to live, nothing else.
You never taught poetry as a teacher?
No, actually I was teacher some years ago, but that was science teacher, not literature teacher.
No, literature teacher.
I worked in a school as a maths teacher, physics teacher, but not a literature teacher.
Hmm. I asked because I'm interested in maybe if your poetry or your writing has helped others around you, maybe other women.
Yeah,
If
actually in the university syllabus, they read my poetry, the students. In many universities, in their syllabus, my poetry is there. And the students also call me, Madam, please explain it, please explain this.
Mhm. Well,
I usually don't teach my poetry, but indirectly they read my poetry, or they read my poetry, the students in the university.
And what reactions have you received from those students?
From readers.
Yeah.
And sometimes good, sometimes anger, because in my writing,
Anger?
yeah, because in my writing there is feminist approach is there, so naturally,
Of course.
in our male-dominating society, male-dominating leadership,
Mm.
it draw
Yeah.
anger.
But you still do you feel that there's still a place for that new poetry made by women?
Yeah,
It's been
definitely
it's been
there is
yeah.
more space there. 60s or 70s, that 40s, 50s, 60s, women's writing is very difficult. They can't write. They have to cook. They have to do the household things. Don't write on. Writing is a crime. I mean, writing is a sin for the women. It's
Really.
not now. The situation is not like that now. We can write. We can write everything without any censorship in our writing. Every sexual experience which is not, which will be untold for women, but we can write it now, which is banned, the sexual experience for a woman to write, but we can write now without any fear. We can write anything. Actually we can try to write anything. No ultimate solution is there.
And I wanted to ask to you, why do you feel there's like an important link between the experience of writing, the experience of sexuality? Why is it important in the creative act for you?
I'm not obsessed, but it's an act like appreciation of nature, appreciation of being, and my feelings, and sexuality is there in my feelings. It is reality, so it comes in the poetry. Not the total focus is in sexuality, but it comes. There is also no fault if anybody write only sexual poems where is sexuality everywhere. It is also welcome.